Hello everyone, my name is Ryan from Reptiles, and this is the Gecko Talk podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Jeff from JMG Reptiles. How are you, Jeff?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
So this is the second time we've had you on, and this episode I've been freaking out about this for a little while, doing all this extra research on this stuff too. And we're going to be talking about the history of the blood, black blood, and Stonewash. So let's start it off from where it began, with the bloods.
Okay. Well, the initial geckos that were selected for bloods were darker, kind of rustier colored tangerines. And at that time, that's when super hypos, super hypo tangerines, especially super hypo tangerine baldies and ones with carrot tail, that was kind of the big thing. That was one of the more sought after line bred traits that people are going after, and those were the pinnacle of tangerines. And we were working on projects like that, but we noticed a lot of those were more gold and orange, and some of them would be bright and they were very pretty. But we wanted to work on a separate line of tangerines because at that time we already had the original geckos for the hyperxanthic project. At that point, we may have been only one generation in. We weren't even calling them anything like that, but it was the beginning of a project that we were selectively breeding at that same time. But we started picking out tangerines, and we picked out ones that had just more dark orange saturation, or some of them were kind of rusty colored. And we actually had a hard time finding ones that were back then that were orange. A lot of them were kind of orange, but they would end up turning kind of brownish. And but they also had spots. So we started line breeding them, and we got some from a few different breeders, and we also picked some up at local reptile shows. And this was really before, or was that at the beginning of the king snake kind of era, where people were going on kingsnake.com. Kingsnake.com was the website, that and Fauna Classifieds, where you had breeders, listing stuff for sale, and people coming, together to, post up. So we did buy some stuff online, but we also picked up a lot of stuff at shows. And over the course of the first 3 or 4 years of line breeding, we started getting a lot better looking tangerines. And we noticed the ones that were brighter, they're deeper orange, they always had spots. And we were well, let's just keep these. And, the whole thing is everybody is breeding for more orange saturated tangerines, but with less spots. And they're well, let's breed one with spots, or not so much. We didn't really care at the time that much. Spots wasn't really important. What was important was the deepest orange. And if they had more spots and they were deeper orange, which actually makes sense because you have more color saturation from the melanin, when you're not, breeding it out and making them hypo.
Yeah.
So naturally we kept going towards a direction where they would be more spotted. And eventually within about 6 or 7 generations, we came up with the name Bloods because they were deep bred. And in my opinion, they were probably at the time the darkest orange geckos probably on the market when we started releasing them. And I think we started releasing them into the 7th year.
Did you release a lot when you first released it, or was it just a small amount?
It was a small amount. And at the time, the price was funny because it was based on it being a line bred trait. And it was also based on the idea, too, that, hey, this is a new lineage of, tangerine. And this is, our lineage of tangerine.
Yeah. And
this is what we did to make it. And there was, price points based on quality. So I see a lot of the first ones we sold, whatever reason, the number was around $900. Most of them were $900. And a really, really nice one, especially a male, they were more around 1,000. And I think a few went up to as much as $1,500.
Oh wow. Well, at that time too, they were probably the nicest tangerines out too, as far as with the dark oranges, I guess.
Yeah, certain people's opinions.
Yeah.
At the time though, for a specific look, yes. But then if you liked carrot tail, then definitely no, because they didn't have much carrot tail. And then, some people too, because they're more burnt, deep orange, some people like the brighter, more bright tangerine orange coloration and the cleanness on the super hypos. Because there was people too, they like, because the bloods were dirty. But again, if you look at a lot of genetics or like traits in other species of reptiles, a lot of times your dirty and busy pattern stuff and your color saturated stuff ends up being the best for projects.
Yep.
Incorporating them into projects. So, and it was a different look. So that's the thing. It wasn't so much about like, hey, this is significantly better than Super Hypo Tangerine Carrot-tail. Super Hypo Tangerine Carrot-tail
still had its own look.
It had its own look and it was its own project. So it wasn't ever. Yeah, there was never any reason like, oh, I don't want Super Hypo Tangerine Carrot-tails anymore. It was just cool to have a tangerine line that was drastically different than every other tangerine line that was going on at the time.
Yeah, I think. Nowadays at least, blood is probably the most sought after tangerine line, or like mandarin now. But blood is like, if you look on Morph Market and stuff, there's like a lot of blood like Tremper crosses and stuff with that.
Yeah, well, because of the bright and deep orange saturation, that ended up being really good for, of course, combinations.
Yep.
Because if you wanted like some of the deepest orange Tremper albinos at one point were like blood Trempers. Like when my dad and I were breeding leopard geckos together, when we had our highest quality blood Trempers, they were unbelievably red. Some of them, like they weren't even really orange; they were just red. And we didn't get you didn't like make a ton of them like that, but they were crazy looking. And I still have a few like that, but as I'm like building up my collection again of leopard gecko projects, but some of those probably back about 10 years ago, they were some of the rarest leopard geckos I've seen. There's definitely stuff out there now that, probably matches them, though, and everything. But the ones I see nowadays, they also have a different look. Because the line breeding and, these other lines like coppers look really good.
Oh,
and the coppers, and some of those, I'm like, man, those are smoking. Those are like, that's like one of the best looking leopard geckos I've seen.
Oh, yeah.
But they have a different look, though, so,
with the lavender.
Cool.
Yeah, it's definitely cool to see how different tangerine lines work with different combinations. Like, Emerine and, let's just say, like, rainwater, if you would, have that influence, it's going to look way different than a blood rainwater.
Yeah.
It's just...
Yeah, that's a cool thing. Well, nowadays, now there's all kinds of, like you said, mandarin. Like, now there's, crazy, red mandarins. Like, they're deep, saturated, orangish red. There's the red diamonds. There's a lot of high qualities. Like, there's a lot more projects going on. Back in the late 2000s, the line bred projects, there was a decent amount, of projects being made, by breeders and stuff. But now there's a whole lot more. So
I think nowadays it looks like more people are working with just like that high, bright color stuff with like clowns, red diamonds, and stuff that's very flashy, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you got the contrast and stuff with the clown stuff of the real high quality ones where you get like that really nice deep, like kind of like burnt orange red.
Yeah.
Then next to the big bold black pattern, and then you get the green portion that's like really pretty. It doesn't really look like this, but it reminds you of like a really high quality like koi carp, where it's like the base is white and then it has its orange, it has the black splotches and stuff, and that's a really good clown G where your clown stuff, or a really nice emerine where you got the green, you have like a really nice contrast of like red and orange, and there's a definition and contrast between the two that's strong, where both are very apparent, and then you got the big bold black pattern blotching, and it looks really cool.
Yeah, it does. I think a lot of that is probably influenced from different things out besides of like leopard geckos for like looks and stuff, but it's cool that a lot of people are able to make like these crazy 6 different colored animals now.
Yes. Yeah, well, the cool thing too is, if you look back like at the year 2000, there was designer stripes, and red stripes were coming out around that time. They came out like right around the year 2000, 2001. I don't really think HQ Reptiles started selling red stripes until like 2001, actually it may have been 2003. But around the year 2000, which is just like, slightly over 20 years ago, there was designer stripes, there was bold stripes, there was like tangerines, there was hypos and super hypos were just being made. And then there was like, the designer stripes, which were like kind of like jungles that were, partially broken up stripes, or they had like other coloration going on, like lavender.
Yeah.
And, maybe some orange. They were like kind of like just a pretty stripe. They weren't just striped. And that was really about it. And, carrot tails were just starting to be made, but that was kind of like, in the same, group as like the super hypos.
Yeah.
And that was like really it. And then, that was like, some tangerines that were pretty low quality as compared to what we have now. And all this cool stuff now, that's actually quite an achievement and a crazy, amount of just like development that these, leopard gecko projects have made through selectively breeding, all its white and yellow combos compared to like what was available 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, looking back at like the old pictures and stuff, and now looking at today, it's a cool difference for sure to see where it started and then where it's at now.
Oh yeah, if you would have like went from like time machine, took somebody that was in the leopard geckos 20 years ago till today, they'd be like, holy crap. 20 years ago, you had a hard time getting orange on a leopard gecko. Like the orange was like, it's like if you could get like actual orange where it was like resembled actual like reddish orange, that was like unbelievable. That color wasn't even really that apparent in most leopard geckos back then. There was like, most of them were just like goldish yellow, or that was it. There wasn't a whole lot going on.
Yeah. So after you created the Bloods, you had a project called Black Blood. Could you explain what that was?
Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of people, especially newer to leopard geckos that are hearing about Black Bloods, a lot of times they immediately think, because now there's all these Black Knight crosses, that there is Black Knight in the Black Bloods, which of course that's not the case, because Black Bloods were developed before Black Knights were even known to exist. That project, that guy was like line breeding for a very long time, but he didn't really come out with it until it was developed. But with the Black Bloods, what happened was, as I said, we were line breeding for the deepest, darkest tangerines, and we didn't, care if they had a lot of spots or if they were dirtier colored. Like, if they came out like with some brown coloration or rusty, but say if they were closer to red, we would pick those. Well, we had different groups. We weren't just like, we didn't have to say like 50 or 80 bloods or 100, and we would just kind of like breed, them back and forth and outcross them so much where they're all like, evenly the same percentage of, blood, or exactly like equal as far as like being related. So we would have certain groups we'd make that looked like a certain way, and we'd start line breeding those. And then sometimes we'd breed them back and incorporate them, like, to outcross back into the project. So we had a large enough number of them and diverse enough numbers where we could keep line breeding the project without ever really outcrossing them, because we're going towards the goal of getting them to this deep, dark, like orange saturated color. And we started out with, a base of like, 4 or 5 different lines of tangerines, and we had a diverse enough collection of them and large enough collection that we started out with where they never really had to be outcrossed. So the further and further we were line breeding them, we still didn't have to really incorporate any outside tangerines, because they were still plenty. Their genetic diversity was diverse enough where they weren't really getting inbred. It basically, essentially, it would be probably equivalent to, leopard geckos in the wild from a locality. There's obviously going to be some inbreeding in those localities, and there's going to be crossover, but there's a big enough population where they never get too inbred. Yeah. And that's not what we were doing with that, because we had so many of them. And But at one point we got to getting ones that were much darker. We get ones that were getting like super dark, rusty brown, and then some were even getting like, black spotting that were like, beyond all their tubercles. And those looked really cool. So then we started line breeding those. And we started getting these like this really rich colored ones, and ones that were no longer really orange or reddish. They were just more like brown. But, of course there was like, some orange in a brown. It wasn't just like, like a flat brown. It was it was like an orangish rusty brown.
Mm-hmm.
And, those started running actually pretty consistently. And so it was a spin-off from the original project that we were line breeding. And they got pretty dark saturated, and then we just kind of coined them. These are the black bloods, because these would just get very, very dark, and some of them too, especially around breeding and after breeding. Like I think you've seen a photo of one I posted on my Instagram stories.
Yeah.
We talked about it. The gecko actually looks black, and then its tubercles, there's some like a yellowish orange pigment, between all the black.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the look of them. They're pretty cool. I know I was talking to someone recently, how you were saying that some people are saying that there might be black night influence with them, and explaining to them kind of what you just said, but yeah, they were just shocked.
Yeah, so because they see bloods, and a lot of people don't realize that there was ever. Especially now, because I wasn't breeding leopard geckos for a little. Well, I never really got out of them. My collection was just extremely reduced, and there was only like a couple of years where I didn't really produce a whole lot, and then I started building back up and everything. And I was focusing and still focusing mainly on hognose.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually have some pretty cool projects going on with them, and I'm trying to recapture a lot of those line bred traits. Or those original projects, I should say,
mm-hmm.
and get them back to where they were. And I have remnants from those, that are still pretty close to the pure lineages, especially in my black blood stuff. Some of it with my bloods. My bloods I have some that are very close to pure, and I've actually line bred them, and they've actually gone right back to looking much like a lot of the pure ones. But they are a little outcrossed, so they're not like 100% original bloodlines, but I got a few that are fairly close.
Mm-hmm.
Close enough where you basically call them 100%ers. They're into the high 90% range. At that point, I don't know if the small discerning 2 or 3, 4% really means anything, especially when at some point there should be sometimes an outcross or something incorporated.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then and then you also have the Stonewash, and then didn't that come from your black bloods?
Yes, basically black bloods, because when we were breeding bloods into albinos, tremper albinos, bell albinos, but we were mostly doing trempers.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that the darkest, dirtiest, deepest colored bloods were going to make the best albinos. So we actually chose a lot of black bloods to, put in the albinos. And the thing about the black bloods, as they get older, most of them get dirtier pigment and they keep getting more black.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had one female that bred, and she keeps getting darker. And now that she's rebounded from laying and stuff, and she's putting on weight and she's growing more, she looks very black. And, and when you have that in the tremper albino version, that black is basically, lavender. It appears as lavender.
Yeah.
And so when you have these black bloods where there's a lot of, melanin and black overtaking the, pigment on the body, or that pattern is existing there, that is, what appears, or shows up as lavender in the albino form. When, you remove that melanin with the tremper albino,
mm-hmm.
what's left there is the lavender. And with the black bloods, as it kind of filled in, on the body, it was like not quite even. It would go between the tubercles and stuff. And so then when you get it in the albino version, a high quality one, you'd be basically streaks of lavender and shattered little pieces of lavender, because that's where the black would be. But it's very consistent and it spreads over the body. And the sporadic portions are, consistent, but it doesn't cover the whole body. So then you got the reds and oranges between it. So then you have this really reddish orange gecko because of the color saturation from the black blood, and then the black is then turned to lavender from the albino, and so then you are left with this very nice deepish orange or goldish orange, reddish, because you get varying ones. Some are kind of more gold orange, some are just really deep red. There's some variability in them, and then you'd have it. Depends on the quality of the black blood, but you'd have portions that were lavender. And again, the higher quality version, you'd have a lot of shattered lavender, and it would look really good because you have this bright orange red and all this shattered like lavender all over the place.
Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people have probably been asking you about the Stonewash and stuff, like where did it go and stuff like that.
Well, I sold some overseas. I never really sold too many in the States, and when we did, it wasn't actually that popular of a project. Like, it wasn't. Like, people liked them, but everybody wanted to breed them into stuff. Nobody wanted to breed them. So very few people were like, man, I want to start a Stonewash project. They're like, I'll buy one or two, or I'll buy... Well, a lot of people were just like, I want one. And they were breeding it to whatever. And, it was such like a... black blood was such like a individual lineage, individual line. When as soon as it was outcrossed, that was pretty much it. It doesn't really come back, even if you breed it back. Of course, it does come back probably to a degree.
Yeah.
But not well. And then, people probably after a couple generations of getting low quality or low grade ones because of the outcross, just bred it to other stuff. And they're actually probably pretty geckos, but the Stonewash trait wasn't showing up a lot because the black blood was like pretty much removed. And that's the thing with the black bloods, like you kind of have to have them pretty close to pure to have that quality. And, when we put them into the Raptors and stuff and kept breeding them in a particular direction, we started getting really, the hets even looked really cool. The hets were like amazing. They were like super black with like gold orange, rusty pigmentation, and and then when you get the albino versions like that, they were very outstanding and interesting looking. But yeah, I sold off a lot of them. I still have ones from that project, and now that I have really good black bloods, I'm selectively breeding those and getting back to black bloods that have like Raptor, mixed into them. So a lot of them are hets or pos hets, and I'm going to focus on making really good black bloods, and then when the Stonewash pop up, I'm going to run with it. Versus taking ones that are from Stonewash lineage and albinos that have, some Stonewash lineage and trying to breed those to recreate it. It hasn't been very successful. I've actually been, I've found it very interesting how little of the trait has come back. Because it seems like as soon as it's outcrossed or whatever, and a lot of it's lost, you can't really line breed it back unless you have the good black bloods there. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
I kind of went back and forth with a lot of stuff, and then I think I went a little in too depth with certain things. I could have probably shortened this significantly if I had thought it out and just said, "This is a black blood. This is what I did." I probably could have answered this in like 2 minutes.
I've noticed recently though, like I've seen some people in Germany with Stonewash, then in Japan too, or stuff that looks very similar to it. But there's been a lot of cases in the United States now, and in like the UK, of people just randomly coming out and saying, "We've got Stonewash," and it never originated from the black blood stuff. It's just the
they might have like the one guy has the XPO project, I think he calls it, and he has some pretty cool stuff that comes out of there, and it resembles Stonewash.
Yeah,
and those look pretty good. And that is not Stonewash, but it's something that's similar looking, and you might I haven't seen what he's done with it recently, but they look very good. I like them a lot. But yeah, I'd be a little skeptical of ones popping up suddenly and saying, "Hey, these are Stonewash."
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the individual people, but the thing is, the project was lost for a long time. They're at an all-time high of popularity because of their look and their rarity. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, people are like, "Well, I got them." That fulfills the the demand, for like, oh, now I finally got them, but I'd want to see them in the quality. Now, there was some very good ones sold overseas, and there definitely is some lineages of them that exist that are probably super high quality. I think the one guy's in Korea.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Has really good ones, and those are probably 100% legit.
Yeah, I was looking at some of those too. Those are looking pretty cool. It's just there's a lot of stuff that can look similar to it, and that's what people are marketing as.
I did sell a few. Yeah, I did sell, like you said, Japan. I did sell a few.
Mm-hmm.
To Japan, and that's the thing. Like, I think I didn't touch base on that. I actually talked about the hardships of. I kind of briefly talked about getting the Stonewash back, but I do have Stonewash. I do produce some. I sold actually a very nice one to Japan last year. I sold a couple. I sold some black blood hets and ones that are related. And actually, I sold a baby Stonewash, and I told him, I was like, this is like Stonewash looking, and it came from the project. I was like, the quality of it is to be determined when you raised up. They were interested in it.
Yeah.
So that's why I sold it.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't labeling it as a straight Stonewash, but they did buy a male. No, it was a female. I did sell them a female that was like from my original Stonewash line, higher percentage of black blood, and it had all the qualities of Stonewash. It definitely qualified as a very high percentage and a high expression blood Stonewash. It was very deep orange red. And it had a lot of shattered lavender multi-striping going throughout the body.
Yeah, there's that look is very. I think it's so sought after now because it's it's really unique looking with all the the lavender just spread out everywhere and broken up. I think now with like stuff that's I guess lavender tones now seem a lot more popular in a sense. Stuff that has like high lavender, I think that's why, at least from what I'm thinking, why a lot of people are now trying to either recreate that look, or look for the Stonewash now.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, like the coloration you see in leopard geckos, you have yellow, black, orangish red, you have brown tones, and you of course have all the patterns, with emerines and stuff like Skittles and like clowns. You have the green from the red, like orange and like yellow coloration overlapping lavender pigment, creating that really cool green. And so the thing is, it's really cool to have those. Like you have your black leopard geckos. You have your really deep orange red ones. You have ones that are completely hypoed out. Red stripes. Like some of these red stripe white and yellow like bells and red stripe.
Oh yeah.
White and yellow trumpers people are making are like super beautiful and outstanding. And they actually like I look at those. I'm like, man, those are insane.
Yeah, the white and yellow bells though. I love those things.
I like those a lot too.
They're really nice.
That stuff reacts very well, and they complement those traits complement each other very well. Even when you have snow incorporated, the snow white and yellow bells look amazing. And when you have those, because the snow Enigma bells were so amazing, but actually the snow white and yellow bells now with selective breeding and stuff, they look actually significantly better, and you don't even really need Enigma and a lot of this stuff to make the things cool. Mm-hmm. So I like those projects a lot. But the one thing is, there's been a lot of these and there's not like you said, there's not a whole lot of lavender projects out there. So it is cool to get more projects going where there's like a good amount of saturated lavender or shattered pattern or some type of cool pattern.
Yeah.
Whether it be something that's like high speckled, things that change it up and things that are, pretty and have busy pattern or beautiful, coloration. So
yeah, it's just nice to see how you were saying, busy pattern. It's nice to see a lot more people are heading towards, the sporadic, crazy looking stuff rather than just solid color or just standard market.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, because that was like in the late 2000s, like 2007, 8, 9. Full carrot tails, real orange bodies. Raptors with carrot tails, and people like busy stuff then too. And the super snows were like still newer then, and but there was a lot more projects going for really clean looks and like less pattern in a lot of cases. But the really heavily patterned stuff and. Even like because like white and yellows are a great example of kind of like a true hypo where it actually mutes the black pigmentation on the actual spots. You're not just removing the spots through selectively line breeding. The spots are actually hypoed, and then they're also like reduced. They're usually not like, they're typically white and yellows don't have a lot of spots, but the spots are there's less spots, but the spots are actually larger, blockier, and then also hypoed. And so those are that's been an amazing project to do combinations with. So as far as pattern and color, and but yeah, that's a cool thing. Like actually, if you look at a lot of the leopard geckos that are like some of the funnest projects to work on, they all have pattern.
Yep. I like geckos that are big and bold. That's stuff with pattern. That's the stuff I like.
You have good taste. It makes sense. I agree.
Well, it's been really awesome to have you on, and I think this is a great point to end it, where people are soaking up all this information and now going to be DMing you about where's my Stonewash.
Maybe in a year.
But yeah, it was really fun having you on and talking about this topic, and this stuff's getting more notice now, and I that's what I want to target now with lines that are almost not really talking about anymore. So
right, yeah, reinvigorate interest in them and stuff. Makes sense.
Well, thank you for having on. If you have any words before you go.
No, that's all. I think I talked too much.
Well, all right. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. You guys have a great night. Goodbye.